I
I
pressed
love
start
it.
stream, just so you know. So I'm gonna go check and double check, triple check, make sure we're live.
All right.
And stream health, you are live. Signal looks good. Actually, give me 1 second to share this video. And guys,
Okay.
please, if you're just tuning in, do me a favor and share this video. I have the man, the myth, the legend, the author, public speaker, Crusader for Christ, Nathan Reynolds. He wrote Snatch from the Flames, and he was at the Denver Convention for Flat Earth 2018 and Question Everything 2019. That's where I kind of got to know you a little bit better. Hi, Nathan.
How you doing?
I'm doing great, bro. Thank you for asking. Such an honor having you on the show, last minute and everything. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was funny, man. The first time I actually came across you, we're at the convention, and Ashlyn goes, "Oh my gosh, like Nathan Reynolds, we got to go chat with him." And I was like, "Oh man, another Nathan on Flat Earth." But
oh no, man.
no,
oh,
I know
no.
it's weird, bro. It was my weird, weird initial
know.
reaction. I don't know why I thought it, but I'm so glad
Everybody does.
I'm so glad that you are here on this Flat Earth with me, because dude, you're so awesome. You inspire me a ton. And Ashlyn, I'll tell you a funny story. She got your book, and she came running over to me, and she goes, "Nate, I opened Nathan's book, and the first page I read, he stabs himself in the stomach and shoots himself in the leg and tried to kill himself." Yeah. And I was like, "What? That's in this book? He stabs himself in the stomach?"
This was after you guys had known me for a couple days, so it had already settled in, right? And then,
yep. Yeah. And so I was just like, "Oh my gosh, I have to read this book." I was so excited. I did read the book. I got super into it. We will get into it. Guys, if you're just tuning in, please share the video. Also, we're going to be getting into astral projection, satanic rituals, cannibalism, burn offerings, voodoo, and all that good stuff. And just give me 1 second. I'm going to share this video with the moderators and administrators for the official Flat Earth and Globe discussion. And we're going to hopefully get them to blast it out. And then we'll get this thing rocking and rolling. So,
looking forward to it.
One of the reasons I want to have you on is because the number one question we get in the official Flat Earth and Globe discussion is, why would they lie? And I don't think people really understand like how calculated the evil is that is out there. And they just kind of think that evil's, in movies, or the boss on the video game, or the monsters under their bed. And I'm like telling people, no, dude, the monsters are on TV, and they're in the politics, and they're the judges.
The people who work it.
Exactly. So that's like the main reason I wanted to have you on is, why they lie, and they seek positions of unquestioned authority and everything. And so real quick, Nate, if you could just introduce yourself and tell everyone about you.
All right. Well, yeah, my name is Nathan Reynolds, and it's a real honor to be on here with you tonight, Nathan. I really appreciate you and Ashlyn taking the time to do this as well, and to each of you that's going to share this out and give us an opportunity to kind of share our story. I know Nathan's really excited about tonight, as I am as well, and so thank each of you for tuning in tonight. It's going to be a not so comfortable interview. Let's just put it that way. Most talks are not the kind that people are prepared for. So I just say that as a little bit of a caution and a warning to some of the genuine extremity of what we got to talk about tonight. That being said, nothing that we're going to cover tonight is going to be not for people's benefit and for people's improvement to understand truth. So I'll put that out there. But yeah, I am someone who has recently come out and begun to speak about the realities of this world, and a world that I was kind of born wedged in between, which was on one side a very normal lower middle class kind of American Christian home on one side, and on the other side it was Luciferians who absolutely sell and promote the agenda of Luciferianism, that ultimately there is apotheosis, that man can become God to an extent, or that his eyes can be opened and be illuminated. And so my family were traffickers in that kingdom for a long time, and has been for many generations. And so I was passed through a lot of that ritualistic abuse starting at a very early age, and I developed a lot of rage and anger and bitterness. in my life. So I turned to a lot of really horrific coping mechanisms that were very craftily engineered for me. And so between sex, drugs, and violence, I was absolutely hooked to the enemy, and began to become a slave for that system. The same system that abused me turned me into one of the perpetrators of destruction and violence on other people. And it led me into a life in the military where that was taken and given a stamp of approval, and where you can have legal wet work, quote unquote. So God really wrenched my life apart, though, about 10 years ago. Right about that moment, not quite where I was blowing myself to pieces, but soon after that he radically upended my life and gave me the opportunity to choose whether or not to come out of this, and instead of perpetuating it on another generation and the daughter that I was going to have, but to make a decision to stop this generational onslaught that has been ravaging the lives of children and of generations of families out there, and instead to expose what was done in secret. And so that's what I've done. I've come in and published my confessional and my testimonial about this life. That way, what I did in evil, what I did in secret, can be known and brought before men, because God says men hate their deeds being exposed because their deeds are evil. And so a lot of the things I did and a lot of the things other people have done have been evil. And now is an opportunity for people to come out and expose these things and find redemption.
Amen, man. We overcome the devil with our testimony. So I'm going to read real quick from your book. These dynastic families have perfected the art of hiding in plain sight, such as those as the Rextus or the dragon bloodlines of Europe, like the Scythians or the Lees of China. In doing this, they have passed on not only what they believe to be the divine seed, but also the secrets, the hidden wisdom only to the initiates they believe worthy to receive it. My family and ancestors of my bloodline selected specific individuals within our own families to carry out the secrets and be guardians who ensure the secrets are protected at all costs. And then you go on to say, as a child, I was made to partake as a spiritual conduit in the darkest of rituals where these divine familial exchanges, contracts, and communications were conceived and conspired. While I grew, the use of my blade outpaced my childish body's usefulness during rituals, and thus I was transferred into keeping the secrets for nearly 3 decades of my life. I was born into darkness of secrecy, threats, and blackmail. There was a time I was seduced by its glamour, by its illustrious appeal, and then it says, it's time for all people can learn the truth of how these kingdoms operate and how these families control so many individuals, that they have 3 primary methods, which are, fear, guilt, and what was the third one, Nathan?
Fear, guilt, and shame.
Shame, there we go. And then the other thing I wanted to read was my father and other so-called family friends hate and forbid my other family members from learning about the DID, and instead they errantly label everyone as bipolar or mentally ill. They cannot allow those truth-riddled threads and of understanding and realization to be pulled. It was not about the truth. It never was. It was about control. So I went over quite a bit there, but can you talk about at what age you started being a part of these rituals with your family and stuff?
Well, it's kind of a muddied question when it gets into at what age did it start specifically with rituals. Rituals are a lot less glamorized and scary demonic looking than most people think they are. Rituals can be something that people do with a certain implementation of their force of will or the intent, and trying to channel basically metaphysical energies to create an action that might cause an entity or another spiritual realm to engage with ours and enact our will. So rituals, when someone was sexually abusing me or traumatizing me, started at a very early age. We're talking preschool kind of time frames in my life. And what is really done at that innocence or that time of life that a child has is they believe really there's a spiritual force within each person, and it's really like Monsters Inc. is the best way to describe it. If you've ever seen Monsters Inc., the kind of Pixar or Disney movie that shows them using small innocent children to scare and traumatize so that this other realm can feed on that energy, that's exactly how it operates in a spiritual sense as well. So they intentionally traumatize and abuse children during extreme torment, and it invokes spiritual powers and manifestations of other spirits for people to talk to or engage in some type of arrangement with. So my body was a conduit for that starting at a very early age.
So you would be there witnessing as they would appear, and these people would start having conversations with these entities?
Yes, sometimes it's not as much common that an entity is fully going to physically manifest in this realm. At times that does happen. Other times someone is fully possessed, either the abuser, the perpetrator. Sometimes myself at times became fully possessed. Other people in the room become fully possessed, and or there was a full spiritual manifestation of another entity. Oftentimes it was a human person, not as much outside of our realm, that would manifest during a ritual as well and speak out what was being summoned upon.
I want to read right here. It says, "Do not fear the terror of the night, nor the fiery arrows that fly by day, for surely his word is true. He will shelter you under his just and loving wings. He will enlarge the ground beneath your feet so you will not stumble. He'll prepare a place for you in the presence of your enemies, and you will walk by streams of living water. I promise it's true. I've seen it to be so." And so, like, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is not because you have such an interesting past, but because you have such a powerful message to deliver to people that we can be redeemed.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Tell me about real quick how you became a Christian.
Well, really, at the height of all of this kind of time in my life, kindergarten going into first grade, my family, when you're someone who is born within the bloodlines, each group, each family kind of has a competitive method which they believe they can kind of climb to the pyramid of power. It's really a dog-eat-dog society. It is nothing like the glamorous kind of portrayal that we often see in a lot of these shows that kind of paint a picture of what it'd be like in these families. More often than not, each family has a method that they believe is the most effective at getting people to become what is ultimately a mind-controlled slave, someone that is totally given over to a set of ideologies or beliefs or convictions that are truly counter against what their natural intuition, their natural innate desire would be. Self-preservation being something that's annihilated, self-seeking, the force of I, that I am no longer an individual, I am a part of the family is first. It's a very cultish mentality that gets invoked into children. And so I had this just never-ending cycle of abuse that was being perpetrated on me. And about 7 years old, I started being exposed to going to Christian schools, seeing this so-called Jesus that people talked about, pastors and Bible teachers and everything else, seeing Jesus being talked about all the time, but almost always being shown this weak, impotent, sissy kind of form of Jesus, this continually crucified, ever weeping, like imbecile, and it's often how he was portrayed. And it was exactly opposite of everything that I was looking for in my life at that time. And I needed to know that there was power. I wanted power in my life. I wanted the ability to fight back physically and spiritually. I knew there was a spiritual realm that existed that was always there. It has always been there. Would continue to be there whether we were here or not. And what I wanted was power to fight back against the people that were around me. And when I was 7 years old, God showed me an opportunity to see power demonstrated. And there was these guys doing this show on TV I got to see called the Power Team. And they're bending all these crazy bars of iron and tearing phone books in half. And they just had this massive intensity to do phenomenal feats of strength. And I saw strong men that were claiming they had faith in Jesus. And I'd never connected those two. And they said to everybody that was listening that we really are weak men, but we've been made strong in Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. It's him that's given us strength. It was them connecting the dots to me of seeing that there was power and authority in Jesus Christ, not just he'll save you one day from hell. Like, no, that like he actually wants to be actively engaged in your life and to be Lord of your life, and that he is greater and more powerful than any other spiritual force on this earth. And so that was the moment in my life where I grabbed onto that and I committed myself. And I was like, if you are who you say you are, save me, deliver me, give me the strength to fight back. But the enemy offered a counter to that soon after and showed me that I could fight back in my flesh and in carnal weapons. And so this is where my life continued down this split path of one side getting deliverance and the other always seeking greater deliverance, and the other side of me always seeking relief and anything to quench the fire. And that side of me ran into these depths of darkness.
So you say here, hear me now, pay close attention to what I'm going to tell you. I'm willing to suffer the scourge of this world, the shackles, the mocking, the character assassination, these accusations, all of it. I'll take their bullets, beatings, and blades. I'll endure their poison, cures, and hate. I've suffered these things time and time again. The blood of my body has been spilled to the point of death more than once. I do not fear, but I do respect the retribution of men, demons, or masters they serve. I will gladly bear this all if only one child, one precious soul, is spared a life like mine. Nathan, did they drain you out and drink your blood?
At times, yes, absolutely.
Wow, man.
So,
In order to do that, they would terrorize you first?
oftentimes it's as it's happening. So there's believed to be certain imbued hormones that are produced by the body, specifically out of the adrenals within the body, that can get dumped into the system in very high quantities as a person is experiencing either states of extreme ecstasy or extreme terror, and to beyond the point of where you basically lose your mind. That level of absolute, in self-defense kind of terms, they call it condition black, where you've completely blacked out and lost your ability to think at all because you're so terrorized. As you flip into that area, your body starts to produce higher quantities of these different chemicals, and people drain that out of your body. They'll either drain it directly out of your kidneys, or they will drain it directly out of your body's bloodstream. And so, yes, during ritualistic workings, at times they would specifically induce trauma as you are being hooked up and drained. My family members had a specialty of doing that, and specifically the more innocent and young a child, all the way down into infancy, babies and children coming out of the womb, this was specifically done in order to drain that and be able to consume it either on the spot or in an attempt to kind of allow it to extend its half-life, and so that people could buy it and process it later.
How do you, what were the main methods you remember of, like, the terrorizing?
For each individual, it can be different, but for myself, it tended to be male sodomy, rape, and a physical incestuous abuse.
Yeah. Do these men do it because they get pleasure from it, or is it more because they're trying to, like, accomplish a goal? Like, are they trying to, like, just, what are they doing it for, bro?
Honestly, like, it's a question each and every one of them can answer. You know, it's maddening to try to believe me. I've tried to peel into the perspective of these guys and of these people my whole life. That's what I ended up, because of my anger and because of my bitterness about this, I ended up trying to uncover what it is that made them the way they are, so I could hunt them more effectively. And I wanted to gain their mindset so that I could climb into their skin and destroy them. And that mindset is something that is so unfathomable to people that have not ever been given over what the Bible calls your conscience becomes seared with a hot iron, and God gives you over to your desires. Yeah. When you are wholly committed to no longer have a conscious will and to be freely, you become a walk-in for spiritual forces as well as for your own flesh and the desires and the deepest sense of a man to come forth. And that's what happens. And there is a generational repeat pattern that is built into this called generational curses. The Bible calls it generational curses. It's something that's been well known and well established for a great long time, that you can intentionally bear family spirits or generations of the same sin. People call it genetics. They want to call it a genetic predisposition to alcoholism. Some of that is spiritual, guys. A lot more of it is spiritual than it ever is physical. And when you have incest, let's say incest going on in a generational kind of setting, it perpetuates itself until someone is willing to make a stand and come out of that completely, absolute abstinence from in every way. And that's how you start to break that. And so I talk about that a lot in the book because it was so pivotal. People, you can't talk about the assassination and this kind of stuff without making sure to be really clear as to how it's orchestrated and built into the mind to get to a place where you're willing to do something like that. And it was because exactly this, because I never saw that there was a spiritual and physical way to fight back that didn't require me hunting people in the night.
So you were talking about how they get you completely committed. This part right here says, it's just like breaking an elephant. You cannot break a bull elephant who's lived his whole life in the wild. He knows the power he possesses. He knows the way he destroys his enemies or breaks out of bonds. Instead, you start when they are young and weak. Simply attach one of their legs to a stake in the ground and watch them wail and pull and strain to be free. Soon the young elephant will realize he can never escape. Once their will is broken, it will never try to be free again. You can tie a threaded string around a fully grown bull elephant and stake it with a plastic bag to the ground, and it will never leave the place you put it. Same way with children. Break them young, and you can own their bodies and souls. Their minds, wills, and emotions become yours for life. Wow. So, like, what do you got to say about that, Nathan? Anything, or should I just move on to the next one?
Well, the analogy that's given there is to paint a picture of absolute enslavement, right? And that these animals, or as we're viewing people as cattle, oftentimes within the families, people are thought of as commodities, like genuinely commodities, like the way that you and I think of beef, a side of beef or pork, whatever.
Yeah.
They think of that people, and it's disposable, and they are something that we can study through operant conditioning. We can create them to be a B.F. Skinner perfect child. And so there's, each family does different methods. My family went with like how you treat a pit bull in order to make it into a monster that fights other dogs in pits all the time. You starve it, you deprive it of its comforts, its safety, of its security. You make sure it's continually in a state of fear and destabilization, and so that when you let it go, you finally give it the opportunity to let all that out. It just destroys everything you send it after. Other families can raise a dog to be like a German Shepherd, a police canine, that's very well fed, that's intentionally bred to be the best possible specimen of its kind. And then you take care of it, you feed it, you love it, you look after it, you discipline it correctly, and then you create a perfect killer companion dog that method. Well, my family chose the dirt and the pit. Other families, people that have this kind of bloodline and this generational thing going on, use the other method, a carrot versus stick approach. So what I'm illustrating in that analogy is that is exactly the way they intend to shatter the mind of a child and to create a controlled slave that will continue to do their bidding the rest of their life, and the lives of their children will be brought right back through it.
You mentioned in the book that you used to fight in pits.
Yeah.
How many times did you do that?
A lot more than once.
Would they give you weapons, or was it just bare hands, or?
Sometimes you'll just have bare-handed wrestling match to an extent, or just training. But yes, there's other times when it is upscaled weapons where you have buff knuckles that are buffed down so that it only does so much impact, and other times it is absolutely fight to the death, and this becomes your snuff films, is what that turns into.
So what are they doing with the snuff films? They just watch them for fun, or keep them as blackmail?
Both and. So if you're getting into like blackmail material, snuff films to an extent are generally not as much used specifically, or not generally used for that. They tend to be more BDSM type people that are getting their jollies off of watching other people die, in no uncertain terms. So it's part of the what you call black gold financing. So this is my family members. You can figure it out. You can make a lot of money by filming people raping children and or compromising people that may later on become in position of power. So blackmail is one big giant arm of this. Well, so is entertainment industry side of this, where this is sold for pornography specifically. So a lot of the snuff films are sold as pornography. They're also sold as kind of an underworld training method as well, that can kind of teach other people how to get their children and or their chosen ones to a place of perfected status.
Bro, you just turned my stomach upside down when you said that people watch videos of people dying for fun.
Absolutely.
Oh man, that's so gross. That kind of leads to this next paragraph I wanted to read, Nathan. It says, "Oh, you reckless and arrogant slaves, just because the collars around your neck and shackles around your wrists are made of gold, onyx, and rubies, You're not any better than the rest. The innocent blood you shed to build your kingdom testifies against you day and night. It is crying out for justice, and he is coming for you like a thief in the night. His terrible and unimaginable day of destruction is coming. He will tread you down to the dust, and the ravens and the vultures shall pick you up in curious. So these people you're talking about with gold, onyx, and rubies, are these the people that you said were in the Knights of Columbus and the Freemasons, or are we talking about different people here?
It's basically an allude to the controllers.
Yeah.
So it's to individuals that hold and wield positions of power and have the ability to expose what is going on, and choose instead to allow the promises of luxury and comfort, power, sex, control to supersede their desire and their need and their requirement that each person has been given on this earth to expose evil to redemption. That you cannot hide what people do in secret. At the end of the day, none of these things these people have done will be made a secret. Everything they've ever done in secret will be shouted from the rooftops. Everything I've ever done will be exposed. Every single thing these people do will be brought to account. And they have this time right now is a time for them to choose whether or not they stay in it and they continue to perpetuate because they're compromised. Almost always it's because they are compromised individuals that this is perpetuated. Every single time these people get compromised, they no longer have the ability to make free will decisions from that day forward. They are under the influence of somebody else's mind. They are under mind control. Absolutely. Even if they don't think it at all, that time I hooked up with that young girl, she promised she was 18 and it was no big deal, right? She filmed it, guarantee it. They have that, and they begin to use that as a point of leverage as that person grows in status. They just may be a guy who runs a know-nothing bank in the small town that he's in. But you know what? If that man ever gets a congressional seat nomination, they have a point of leverage over that individual for the remainder of their life. Yeah. And so these people like myself are sown out there in your normal, everyday neighborhoods so that they look like the neighbor next door. But at night, they go and do these activities. They capture people raping their own children on tape, and then they sell that tape to other people that are under this underworld because that might be the means to blackmail someone for a huge amount of money someday or extort another racketeering scheme off of a business deal. This is how that operates.
That leads me right to this one. It says here, there's a judgment waiting for all of us, no matter the promise. Artificial intelligence, holographic avatars, transhumanism, genetic enhancement, quantum reality, or whatever cup of life they promise you, all will be rendered their final due. I decided to surrender to him rather than face outer darkness or deepest flames. I chose to surrender to him and become an inheritor of hope, a rescued one. I write you these words so that you may be without excuse. None of you is innocent, not even one. There is hope to those who surrender, and to you who choose not to, know that he is coming for you nonetheless. You cannot escape the Holy One of Israel. Pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. It says here, every day I woke up dead. Some days I woke up, my heart no longer beating, limbs cold as ice. I was a walking monster, controlled by my many masters' manipulative hands and torturous tricks. I was dying, and who was there to tell me don't quit? Who was there to say don't give up? Where were all the believers who saw my bruises and my bandages? Bro, the saddest part about this whole book is you include a ton of pictures in the book of you having broken hands, black eyes, you being like held down and blindfolded, and like that's all your past, dude. That's all stuff you had to go through, man. I gotta give you so much props because, like, I don't know if I could ever do it, bro. I'm sorry that had to happen, dude.
Me too, Yeah. But there's a lot more people that it's happened to than have ever been willing to ever talk about it, and especially for men. There is in many ways movements that have gone out there to try to seek the exposure of sexual abuse going on, and unfortunately it's an extremely difficult topic for men to talk about more than darn near anybody.
It's so humiliating.
Absolutely, it's unbelievably humiliating, but this is our charge, this is our calling on my life. Like, I faced down horrific things times and times again, and I've kept going. There are people that have gone through these horrific situations that someone else hears the story and they can't even imagine going through 10 minutes of that, let alone months or years or decades of lives like that. But those people that have made the decision to continue to survive, continue to keep on living no matter what, even though their life, they were born into a horrific home life situation, they continue to overcome, they continue to adapt and become survivors. They're some of the most incredible people in the world, often busted up and with a lot of baggage. But when they get cleansed and delivered and restored, and you can allow God to give you a different perspective on the madness of your past, He can start to give you a whole new hope and a new calling and a purpose, where He redeems horrible things like what I went through, but allows me the opportunity to strengthen and encourage somebody that's going through that has been through that, and needs an opportunity to know that they can get out, that they don't have to stay where they are. They can come out and be free and be healed and be whole. They don't have to stay like a shattered individual the rest of their life. They can begin to learn and experience the fullness of what this life should be rather than what it was.
Amen. Amen. And He says He's going to wipe away every tear from our eyes, bro.
It's all worth it, man.
It's going to
make it worth it.
You guys got to get this book if you're listening to this interview. I've never had a book make me cry and then smile, and the way you write about your wife is so lovely. It's so beautiful. And then in the next page, I want to throw up, dude. And I'm just like, wow, this should be a New York Times bestseller. But I will say, this next part was like the hardest part for me to read. So let's get into it. It says here, I'll spare you the full details which shattered my soul, and Danny's with it. I do not, for your sake, but for his, to let her death not want to be wasted on keystroke in ink. They killed his mother that night in the grove in twisted and terrible ways, right in front of his eyes and my own. It says here, what song do they play at your friend's funeral? What do you do when the funeral was nothing more than monsters cleaning up the mess? What do you do when you have to watch them shovel pieces of the body of your friend's mother into construction-grade black bags that are thrown over shoulders while the rest of the coven walk away in silence, stomachs freshly filled with her blood and flesh? Later, burials will be in bathrooms, trash cans, or sinks where they will vomit her out into toilets or on the side of the road. Will they burn her at the family's veterinarian office crematorium or in the funeral home's incinerator, or just dump her in an unmarked pit dug by desensitized drones? Will they leave her in a car parked 20 miles in the middle of the desert with its windows cracked down to let the bugs in to do their work but keep scavenging critters out? Will they shove her ashes down the drain or scatter them into the winds of forgotten dreams? So, Danny was someone you knew from school, and you guys both went to this ritual. It was, I guess, a week before summer solstice.
Winter solstice.
Solstice. And they, I guess, plan a lot of these rituals around, like, heavenly bodies and when things are happening in the sky.
Absolutely. Different groups will operate differently, but they're generally, it's a giant clock in the sky that they set. Thy will be done on this earth as it is in heaven, right? There is it's like standing under the throne of God and saying, I align myself with you and want your will to be done here. Well, go align yourself with a certain celestial body and invoke that body to come and have its will be done on this earth. So yes, they're generally, groups will operate specifically under a different calendar than the Gregorian one that we operate under today.
So, can you tell me, like, what you saw that night?
Yeah. Danny, for those of you that don't know, the chapter where he's reading from is called The Dodge Viper. And Danny was a guy I met, a young man I met on the school bus on one day on the way to school. And he and I just had a nice conversation. And he really was interested in my violin. I played violin at the time. I was in the orchestra. I loved music. It was one of my outlets and an escape for me. And he had a passion to play the cello. And so I ended up sharing him an opportunity to kind of check out my violin, and he was really nice. And Unfortunately, Danny's family, to an extent, was involved in the coven that was operating there at the time in the town that we were in the mountains. And when that ritual night occurred, Danny slipped something into my pocket on the way down there to what was, without question, one of the worst things I was ever a part of. But there was a ritual done in a grove, specifically in the woods, where they do high sacrifice offerings on an Indian reservation. And it's believed that there's greater familiar spirits, native spirits that you can call upon and have a greater access, or kind of there's a thinner veil on this reservation that they go to. And so it was there that they brought a portable altar and set that up and ritually abused his mother and sacrificed her that day, and they cannibalized her.
When you say ritually abuse, like, what did they do?
Specifically, they will be cutting the body in a manner and in a precise method in order to invoke certain entities. As you carve out different pieces of a person to feed on them, you invoke different spirits, or the individual doing the cutting is calling upon their familiar spirit and feeding that spirit as they consume them. So they ritually consume her till she's dead.
They ate her alive?
Absolutely.
Do they cook the pieces, or like, is it raw?
Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. This is the whole pizza. Some people like to mix it into whole food groups and store it like a freezer and like an entree. Other people consume it at a ritual site only, and that's it. Other people like to perpetuate the consumption of human flesh on an ongoing basis.
So, like, you're telling me they, like, tied her? Did they tie her to the altar, or was she, like, chained up?
They bound her to it, yes. It was with rope or dark cordage material.
And it was like a trapezoid type structure?
No discernible, real noticeable shape. Kind of a rectangular planks.
Okay.
Not really. It's not like special custom gold stone altar kind of thing. These are constructed form follows function tools, like that are used for nasty sexual fantasies that are repurposed to be used for altars that are portable and buy them at a store.
What did they use to cut her? Like, was it just a kitchen knife, or do they have like special tools like they use? Or
I mean, they just had basically carving cutlery.
Gosh. And you said something about them throwing these. Is this something that happens a lot after they consume a human? Is that they vomit it up?
Yeah, most people do get sick. Absolutely. And so it's not natural to consume raw flesh for most people on a single basis, let alone human flesh. Most people's body gets incredibly sick from it. So, but they're generally possessed, or they're drunk, or they're high, and they're taking all kinds of drugs as well at the time. So they get sick from that too. So there's just, it's disgusting. It's filthy and putrid.
What are they getting high on?
I couldn't tell you the specifics of what they were taking.
Okay.
Some, more often than not, they're snorting and they're popping pills and they're drinking.
Yeah. Did they ever put you under the influence of stuff?
At times, yes, I was under the influence of substances.
Do you remember what substances, or just
more barbiturate-based substances, pain relievers, painkillers, have like preconscious sedation, drugs that are used for preconscious sedation. A lot of what dentists will use, laughing gas, that kind of stuff, so that while certain types of abuse are occurring, you have the ability to experience more pain or less pain, or that your recovery process is less noticeable.
Okay, here's the big question I want to ask. If they're all in the coven, why are they sacrificing her? Like, why her?
Great question. For what they told us, and Danny and I both were in trouble for alluding to speaking the secrets. And so the reason that we were given that she was sacrificed was because she spoke the secrets, and she had revealed the ways of the coven to an outsider, and it had brought interest and activity to the group. And so by somebody that was an outsider. And so that's the reason that we were told, that's the reason she was sacrificed. more than anything else I've learned, Nathan, so much of what they told me was to continue to perpetuate the deception to keep me ensnared in them.
Yeah.
I have no idea why they killed her that night. I have no, what's the real honest answer to that? More than likely not what they told me.
Yeah.
Right? That's what was reinforced to me. That was what was perpetuated into my mind and sealed into my mind, so that I would, anytime I would think about speaking the secrets, that's what I would think about instead. This is what they'll do to my family. This is what they would do to my friends. This is what they would do to my sisters. That was reinforced to me by seeing that. It wouldn't happen all the time. It wasn't that every single time people go out to do this, they're killing people. More often than not, it's a bunch of nasty people just going out and having orgies and speaking a bunch of incantations and rituals, or getting into incest. That's more what it looks like. When there are human sacrifice, it's a big deal, and they don't waste that, as they would put it, in order to influence and control the group.
What did they have you guys doing while that was all taking place? Were you like forced to watch it, or just in the area, or?
I was forced to watch it.
And did they like sit you down, or did they tie you to something, or did they like hold your eyes open? How do they?
They just, you stand between the legs of your master, the guy who is over you.
Wow, they kind of like put you in between the legs and your head pops out?
Yeah, let's say that, right? Wow. You can imagine.
Oh, man. So
this is the deeper depravity, right? Like, people got to understand, this is a reality of, there's a whole other level of radical intelligent evil that exists out there, that God calls them inventors of evil. These are people that literally invent ways of doing evil, horrific things. The reality is, this stuff's been going on for thousands of years, and you can go look at statues of old men bending little boys over as people are being sacrificed in front of them. This has been going on for a long time, a specific kind of rite ritual that is done. It's a horrible thing, but this is, like I talked about early in the book, this is the secrets that these people keep. This is how they control people's minds. This is how they spiritually influence and manipulate and have power over people. This is the kind of things they're willing to do in order to control your mind. This should give people a better understanding of what these people are willing to do in order to win, in order to be the top dog.
Wow. Yeah, they'll do anything.
Absolutely. Eat their own children. This is not a joke. God promised this. This has been going on all through the scripture. We see these people that would go, and it says they bake bread. They bake humans like bread. God warns us about these people. They eat people like bread. Like, this is for thousands of years. This is how it's been going on.
Wow, yeah, and people always say, well, why would they lie to us about the shape of the earth? It's like, well, they're not going to tell you you're their food, you know, or that they're going to drink your blood, or, I mean, these people, they'll do anything to conceal their deeds and keep them hidden.
Because they are ruled by fear. And I know there's so many people, like, I know what I just talked about is, for some of you, the first time you've ever been exposed to any of this stuff. And, like, I know it's mind-bendingly horrible. But, like, you got to understand, if you press through this moment right now where you're feeling that fear and that so overly, utterly repulsed and revulsed, you should feel that. That's understandable. But this entire world is allowed to perpetuate this deception, and all this stuff happens because good people that hear it going on around them or hear about it are so freaked out by it or think it's so impossible, they cognitively dissociate in order to escape from that. They use cognitive dissonance to separate themselves from the realities of that, because they say, I can't comprehend that. That's too crazy. I'm going to shove that over in that other box. It's the same thing what happens with a lot of these truthier, fringier topics. Well, ritual abuse is one of the first ones people are going to throw as far away from them as they can. But I encourage you, hang with us here for a little bit, because what you're going to hear is that how these things that these people do that are willing to do this, what happens when you expose that to the light and allow people that have experienced that, people that stumbled onto that one day and had no idea what to do, now have an opportunity to actively make a difference and stop that if they see it happening around them. The reason I wrote that chapter, the reason I wrote about Suze and what happened during that time in the mountains there, was because I wanted people to see these were the signs and the symptoms of what was going on. Pay attention to the people around you. And you know what you would realize? This stuff is all around you. And it's time that you expose that. It's time that you might be the person that could save that person's life. Danny put a little car in my pocket that night that helped me to survive the madness of what we just experienced. And God used that to place in me hope that things would get better one day. He used that to give me the opportunity to be redeemed, and so that memory wouldn't be stuck as the justification method for me to be a monster the rest of my life. Instead, God used that and turned it into a fuel that would allow me to pursue exposing these things, being willing to suffer the sake of truth, and seeing people set free because of it. That's why I do this. That's why we have to talk about these things, because there's hope for people that have been a part of it or it's touched their life.
Nate, one last question on that. How long do you think they spent torturing Danny's mom before she was finally passed away, dude?
I have no idea a specific.
You think it would be like 10 minutes or an hour or like hours?
Hours.
No way,
like,
dude.
Absolutely. You know what a skin graft tool is, Nathan?
No, I don't know what a skin graft tool is.
It is a very, very precise adjustable blade, extraordinarily sharp blade. Think of a cheese grater on a roller.
Oh,
and you can adjust the depth of it so that you can take off certain and specific layers of skin from a person in a very precise way. That is a way that you can consume someone for a long period of time and make ham or bacon. I'm not joking. This is what these people do. They bake people like bread.
Oh, God.
All right. Well,
all right, man. You want to know specifics?
Yeah, bro. You know what, dude? For 15 years of my life, I've been praying my mind. I'm so visual that my mind races, and I just hate thinking myself what's happening. I'd rather just have you tell me, because my mind.
Well, there's a reason. That's why there's a benefit to putting out specifics. Okay, that's why I don't just tell people, "Hey, I was abused." Hey, yeah, guys molested me. No, you have to. There's a reason we should have specificity in our language, because the enemy uses doublespeak to perpetuate all of this on the world. That out of one side of the tongue of a serpent comes streams of truth. Out of the other split tongue comes lies. And this whole world has been predicated on the fact that people don't know how to discern between truth and lies, because there's always this double stream going on out there. So it's good that we be specific about what it is that people are doing, so that we can clear out the nonsense behind the scenes, and to make sure people have a very accurate understanding of why it is these people do what they do.
So tell me a little bit about what happened when you tried to go against your family, and it kind of they figured out that you weren't someone they could control anymore.
Well, really kind of the breakdown started after someone handed me a book about breaking the generational curses of Freemasonry and praying off those curses. And so I got prayed for by a man named Tom Dunn at a conference. He didn't know me from anybody.
Wait, is that Tom from Through the Black?
Yeah, Tom Dunn and Jared Cressman on Through the Black.
I just did an interview with them like a week ago. Tom's awesome guy.
Oh, nice. Absolutely. And he didn't know me at all. He was doing a film on satanic ritual abuse that they were promoting there. And he ended up just praying for me. They did a session. Russ Dizdar, a guy who has been dealing with this kind of stuff for decades, 4 decades, has been dealing with dissociative identity disorder, satanic ritual abuse, and occult crimes originally for the police department as a chaplain. And that's how he kind of started being brought in on all these occult crimes and started seeing what the heck is this whole underbelly that nobody talks about. And so he ended up getting involved in a ministry doing that. Tom prayed for me down there at that conference, and God started a deliverance in me at that time. And it gave me this opportunity to start finally experiencing deliverance from these addictions and the bondages to pornography predominantly and substances for years and years of my life. I had needed to alter my state of consciousness in any way at any time to try to avoid the reality of what I'd done and what I'd been a part of. And God started this process for me there. And at the time, my wife was 4 months pregnant. That was really the impetus for me. Was our daughter was on her way, and I needed to figure out how to be a dad, because I had no idea how to be a dad. I knew how to become a terrible person, and I knew I needed deliverance. So I ended up getting this unbelievable amount of healing brought into my life. God had started finally bringing me better perspectives on these memories, and I started finding so much freedom and getting to a place of understanding what happened to me and why I was the way I was, and these things that I'd done everything I could to avoid ever dealing with finally got cleared up. And so I was so overwhelmed with this joy. I had freedom in my life. Like my wife and I loved my wife in a very real way for the first time in years. Like she had been a stranger to me. It was like I woke up one day in the body of a guy who was married to a woman that I knew nothing about. And in that moment, I started to see, my gosh, I can find hope. My family needs to know about this. So I didn't tell them directly immediately, but I ended up calling my mom and asking for a bunch of records, basically, our genealogical records or heraldry, to try to substantiate some of what it was that I'd been a part of. And so, unfortunately, I started talking to her about the Knights of Columbus. And the Knights of Columbus is what my grandfather and primary abuser and kind of controller throughout my life is a fourth level knight in the Knights of Columbus. And he was someone who had spent a great deal of time shattering and specifically traumatizing and programming me throughout my life. And I basically put out to my mom a warning about the Knights of Columbus and about what they're really doing. And thinking in my head, this was kind of a good way to help her come to a place of protecting herself, protecting my other family members that still may have the opportunity to be abused and hurt. Needless to say, this went very, very badly. My mom was the last I had with my mother. And soon after that, a couple of days after that, there was a group of assassins sent after my wife and I outside of a movie theater. And our whole life went from kind of normal-ish, we'll say, to without any question, it turned into, you will stop talking about these things for the sake of your daughter. My own family members threatening the life of my unborn daughter for the sake of speaking these secrets, to people coming after us and every area of our life being destroyed. Job, I mean, everything, absolutely everything was completely torn out from under us because I refused to stop speaking the secrets. But I found there was greater freedom in speaking the secrets, and it was better to be a free man with nothing. Like in Proverbs, it talks about it's better to eat leeks and onions and herbs in a house of love than it is to eat the fattened calf in a house of mourning and grief and bitterness.
Amen.
It's better to live a life of poverty and feel peace at night and feel joy and contentment than it is to live a life of luxury and be absolutely discontent and insufferably insatiated. It can't be satisfied. I'd known what it was to continually be unsatisfied in my life. And I finally felt satisfaction for the first time in my life when I wholly went into being willing to speak the truth no matter what it cost me.
How many times did they try and harm you and your family? Because I read about the movie theater incident, but how many more times were they coming after you?
That was the most overt one that I can talk about publicly.
Yeah. You said in your book that they used to leave like bones around your house and voodoo cones and burnt offerings.
So, not voodoo cones; they're called power cones.
Okay.
Yes. So there were times when, like, Chelsea and I started really going through this place of we were wholly dependent on God. It wasn't like a little bit, like either God, the God of the Bible, like the whole Bible, like the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God who we hear about doing all these amazing things. Either he's still true and real, or we're gonna die. Like it wasn't like a little bit. Like I knew absolutely that if God didn't come through, there was no. Listen, these people don't mess around. It's very simple. Like, as far as it was reinforced unto me and the kind of reinforcing I did for these families, if you're someone who goes out there and actively destroys or seeks to destroy and upend a family or a group, you become target, period. And they will find a way to eliminate you. And almost always the goal is to do it through what looks like accidental means, right? So that this person looks like it was a collateral damage. So there might be 3 car accidents in a traffic scene, and 2 of the people are dead. Well, you're one of them, right? And the other people are sacrifices, to put it nicely. And so that is the primary method that's used. And I knew that I had to rely on that either God would protect us or he wouldn't. And so I placed my faith in him completely. And he took care of us and began thwarting a lot of these attacks that were going on and providing us safety. Well, soon after that, I started finding these huge chunks of fat and other refuse, body parts or animal parts being buried in specific on the corners of my property at the time. And what these are used to do is to try to break down the spiritual protection that you have, or what they believe is basically like a cosmic force field that's surrounding your property. And so this is kind of like, a lot of times they'll assume, they don't know that you like necessarily that like it's because of God that you have a powerful protection going on in your life. A lot of times they just assume you're just a higher level witch or a higher level warlock, that you have a greater anointing on your capabilities. And so they just do the magic that they have always done to try to undo what you're doing. And so, yeah, we started finding these ritualistic workings being done on our property as well.
I'm going to read this part. This was one of the most interesting parts I heard. In the months following severing ties with the family, the more significant form of attack came against Chelsea and me. Most individuals will not suffer this type of engagement, but to those who do, I hope you will know there is no weapon formed against you that will prosper. It didn't take long for us to learn what this was. These spirits coming against us were not demonic, nor were they devils or high powers. Rather, these icy presences which would go into the house, often appearing as shadowy creatures, were human spirits called astral projections or astrals. In occult groups, individuals are taught by the aid of other spirits, meditative practices, as well as with altered states of consciousness, how to separate their spirit from the body. It's a practice now widely taught and propagated in New Age and Eastern art circles as a way of going on the astral planes or the higher levels of consciousness. The planes are dimensional battlegrounds where fallen ones are engaging with those righteous heavenly hosts, and it's not a place for mankind to dwell. Those who do know the secrets of occult workings operate on this spiritual plane to curse, attack, or target individuals. My family members, like many others in the bloodline families and brotherhoods, are highly trained in this practice so they can learn intimate knowledge about their enemy's curse or to torment their targets. Bro, tell me about these astral projections.
Yeah. So, becoming something that's a lot more mainstream. It wasn't something that was as widely understood and or talked about. But basically, in the Bible, it talks about that there's three heavens. The first heaven, which would be the earth. The second heaven, which would be the heavenly kind of bodies, that space between the throne and the throne of God and us. The second heaven realm, and the third heaven, which is where God's realm is and where he resides. The second heaven would be these astral planes. Or these other people might want to say, hey, these are the dimensions, fifth dimension to the 11th dimension. Basically, what this is a spiritual realm wherein human beings we are not now allowed, or should we be going up into this other realm. The reality is, there was a fall and a separation that happened in the Garden of Eden because of man's desire for godhood, his eyes to be open, and for him to be as God. The enemy hooked us in through that. Well, after that, I don't believe that we had the ability to access these planes because God intentionally separated our ability to do that for our protection, because we have no business being up there right now. That being said, these people use that as a intelligence gathering array, that they go on the second heavens, they go into these celestial realms through astral projection. Generally, a very deep meditative state is achieved in the individual, with which they invoke, whether willingly or knowingly or not, they invoke another spirit to come occupy their body, and other spirits generally that guide them or carry their body with them along these spiritual planes of existence. And this is a very real place. Like, there's a lot of really amazing believers out there, people that have come out of New Age practices, people that have come out of the occult, people that were specifically trained in order to do this. There's people that use this as almost a backdoor realm in order to target and eliminate people physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, to gather what would seem like supernatural information on another business partner. Remote viewing is another phrase that is being used to kind of discuss this same kind of practice that's going on, a little bit different. But this is the place where kind of this battleground is going on. And family members of mine, or individuals that were within these covens in our neighborhood at the time that we were trying to expose, were continually going on this spiritual plane and would be tormenting Chelsea and I, or tormenting other people that we would know of as well. And it's not the same as a demonic attack. It's not an experience that happens the same way. This is people that might see human spirits running by them at times, or kind of continually tormenting one of their children. It's not always a demon. Sometimes it's a human being who's doing stuff in a spiritual realm they have no business doing.
We had a guy in the group who got added to the group, and he astrally projected, and he said, no, you guys are all wrong. The Earth's not flat. I astrally project. And so about 2 weeks later, he texts my buddy Kyle and says, hey, you're right. And my buddy Kyle's like, right about what? What are you talking about? And he goes, oh, well, I went to astrally project, and I looked at the Earth, and it was all blurry. It wasn't how I normally saw it. And so he started researching the flat Earth, and now he's a flat earther. And so yeah, he was into the New Age astral projection stuff, not like
Yeah.
the occult astral projection stuff, but very real stuff.
Absolutely. You know, and the reason we're not supposed to be doing that is because what happens is we become any practices that cause you to, that are intentionally invoking the elimination of yourself, your own thought, clearing and emptying out space in your head, being completely emptying of yourself. Listen, nature abhors a vacuum, right? Which is a big problem for a whole other reasons. That vacuum, there is no spiritual vacuum in a human being. We are continuing. The word calls us a temple. We're a tabernacle. We're like a skin suit. Spiritual forces will influence us, and if we empty ourselves of ourselves and allow another spirit to come into us, because that's what's going to happen, whether you believe you're doing that in your yoga practice or you're doing that in a specific New Age attempt to try to go on the astral planes only for your own pleasure, fun, intrigue, desire for apotheosis, your desire to achieve nirvana. Some of these things that you're doing, what you're doing is you're emptying yourself of yourself, and you're allowing another spirit, a lying, deceiving spirit, to come and try to tell you the truth, to try to show you things and give you the opportunity to know truth, or use different hallucinogenic substances to try to achieve the answer, or get something to give you the answers to what you need. You know, ayahuasca and some of these other plants that people go on these trips, they all have these kind of common stories or experiences that they come back with, or this specific womanly character that comes and speaks to them. That is a lying spirit that is trying to teach them and hook in more people into a delusion.
Wow. Interesting, dude. I totally had something to say that whole time, and then right at the end, I forgot it. What was I going to talk about? Any questions, Flambe? While I'm drawing a blank, because I definitely had a good one.
At the moment, I'm just shocked right now. I just kind of speechless.
Darn. I had something super interesting to say, and I totally forgot it. Hey guys, I love you. I'm drawing a blank, mate. I'm sorry.
All right.
Yeah. So what's next for you, bro? I heard you're gonna be Truth Quest Calgary.
Yeah. That'll be my first kind of international conference that I'll be speaking at. So. For those of you that don't know, I was one of the speakers at Question Everything Conference in California. That's where we got to meet and kind of actually get to know each other a lot better. But yeah, I'll be speaking at Truth Quest Calgary, which is going on May 17th, I believe. And there's going to be some amazing people there as well. Matt Long, Robbie Davidson, I believe, as well as Mark Sargent and Jared Cressman from Through the Black, who you just did a show with as well, like you were telling me. So it's going to be an incredible show. Emily Pittsford. Also, Emily Pittsford.
Awesome. Emily's actually watching the show right now.
Right on.
Yep.
Emily's amazing. Absolutely incredible.
Glowbusters.
Her book, A Most Incredible Witness, was one of the most challenging. I'll just put you real quick. Right here. This book. Because I can.
Tell me about it. What happened?
Okay. Her son. Basically, long story short, the book chronicles her life to an extent, but really it kind of follows her son. And soon after college, he ended up being a witness to a woman being hit and run in an intersection in San Francisco, and he ended up chasing the driver through these streets of the city, trying to get his license plate to report him. The woman did die at the scene, and so he was able to get a partial plate to help lead to that actually coming to fruition and justice being done. But soon, 2 days after this, he ends up being dead in his bed. Her son does, and so it was an absolute horrific situation. And the book chronicles her story of coming to grips with, this impossible reality happening to her. Wow. And it walks you through a mother's grief, a family's grief, and in a very unapologetic and raw way. And it was incredibly beneficial for me to give me a perspective on something I've done most of my life trying to avoid, which is the implications of people that were left behind from the things I was made to do in my life. And so it was brutal on one side for me to go through that, but also very healing and restorative to see someone have something so horrible be turned into something that is so beneficial and good. So highly recommend it. Emily Pittsford, A Most Incredible Witness, a great book.
So Kurt, he's actually the gentleman that I'm staying with. He has an extra cabin out here in College Station. He asked a comment on the video. He said, ask Nathan Reynolds if he's familiar with who Fritz Springmeier is.
Mm-hmm.
He said, there are several Reynolds mentioned in Fritz's book, 13 Bloodlines of the Illuminati.
Yeah, absolutely. Fritz is one of the first kind of what you would say an outsider to bring forward a lot of the heraldry of the bloodlines, and he was one of the first people to put forth the Reynolds. I believe that was in the mid '90s that kind of came out in that way. He, almost immediately soon after, served some not so fun justice system ramifications for kind of coming out and speaking the secrets as well.
What did they do to him?
They threw him in jail. Absolutely.
Same thing they did with like Kent Hovind and all them. Like
mm-hmm.
that.
Jim Staley, yeah. They've thrown a bunch of them and they just throw them in jail. It was a lot more common, seemingly a lot more common back then. Kind of seems to be different. More character assassination is what seems to be the modus operandi today. Just make everyone either come out to be crazy.
Yeah. Wow, just throwing people in jail. That's crazy. Your family, do you remember seeing any like famous people at these rituals and stuff? Like, would like a president ever show up or anything like that?
To these rituals or to what?
Like, was your family like to the rituals? Like, did you ever see anyone in like a coat, like a robe, that like, oh man, I know that guy from TV?
The reality is there was not a lot of, let's get real. The vast majority of people that.
Uh-oh. Lost you there for a second, Nate.
That are very intentional at not wanting to be known. But the individuals that abused me, like my great-grandfather who I was sold to in the mountains in Arizona, he was the former president of the American Society of Civil Engineering. And
wait, did you say you were sold? Side,
yeah, that was on the street.
You said you were
absolutely.
They sold you to him?
Absolutely. I became his live-in boyfriend, family member. They moved him into the bedroom next to mine.
How much?
It helped pay for my family's rise out of this kind of lower middle class mediocrity to all their dreams can come true, and private house. Multiple houses, airplane, like kids all going to private school, new cars, everything. Boom. Like upgraded my family's lifestyle. Dad and mom don't have to work. Everything's taken care of as long as grandpa is jollies with me.
How did they pick you?
Generally, so I talk about this in the book, the selection process, but generally there's basically a testing process when children are extremely young, like 0 years old, like birth until they're 3 to 6 years old, that they're evaluating their susceptibility to dissociate and their whether or not they'll what they call break bad. So some people under severe trauma, stress, and abuse will dissociate. It's a natural wiring within our brain, I believe a gift that God gave us to no longer think about what's happening and survive on impossible things. Basic dissociation is on a grade. So you can have a 0 or a 1 might be if you've ever driven home from work one day, you arrive home and all of a sudden you're like, wow, I kind of don't remember the last 30 minutes because you've done it 500 times or you've done it 18,000 times, whatever. Yeah. That's basic dissociation, right? This is something that is an occurrence within us. Well, you can amp that up within a person to where while they're being abused, that same mechanism makes them split off an aspect of their personality or their soul within their mind. A neurological phrase for it is what's called a trauma neural network, or a group of neurons then locks up that trauma within it in order for the rest of the mind or the brain to keep going on and functioning. Well, that shattering process when the soul splits can cause people to go crazy and they just never come out of it, and or they're never able to function after that. It's almost like part of their intelligence has been knocked off the block and they become more or less mentally deranged the rest of their life. They call that a breaking bad. in the family. So this is why you'll see a lot of super intelligent children and then one totally bonkers child. And that's how part of the selection process is done, whether or not they have a high enough intelligence, high enough levels of creativity, and the capacity to endure repeated ongoing abuse and split and maintain separate and distinct personalities in order to perpetuate what it is that they have an agenda for that. So I was the chosen one for my family. I can't say specifically what happened to my sisters other than what I was an experiencer of. I was the one who was selected to for this to be perpetuated on for another cycle, and then to keep those secrets, guard and protect them for the family and the brotherhood, no matter what.
Wow.
Interesting. Wow. Hey, I want you to know Bob from Glowbuster says, please tell Nathan Reynolds I think he's an amazing individual. I applaud his bravery and standing up and telling the truth.
Wow,
so,
it's very humbling.
Yeah. And
thank you.
Yeah, I don't think Bob. I don't think Bob's a Christian, so he got to hear our whole message so far tonight. I'm pretty sure he's been listening.
The reality is that's the only message that ultimately matters at the end of this is not that people know my name or know my story at all. It's that they would come to know the one who saved me. Like, it doesn't matter, man. At the end of the day, like, there's tens of thousands of people like me out there. Like, you can't get your head around how much this goes on and in how many different levels. I met so many people that were involved in gang violence, and the way that this cycle of violence, sexual abuse, violence, and drugs, it becomes this unseparatable cord around the neck of people to control them the rest of their life. And I've seen it, and now I got to meet so many people that were involved in gang violence and their family and the family situations and the just absolute madness that they put people through in order to get them to do this. Like, you lose a fight when you were 6 years old at school, that they would drag you to your friend's house that beat you up, or the kid that beat you up, and say you fight again, and the parents would get around a circle and watch the boys beat each other nearly to death in the front yard to teach them how to harden up and who was tougher. I've had so many people tell me stories like that was normal. That was their normal. Okay, this is not some super crazy far out there thing. This is millions of people grow up with this kind of reality just being every day. And they are left with this in their head, and so they try to either follow after it or be the person that makes a change for it and says, no longer am I going to be the one that does that anymore. So everybody who's ever gone before me and has been willing to speak the truth, even about, it doesn't have to be about specifically things like we're talking about tonight. It could be on other conspiratorial or fringe topics. The reality is that when people begin to question the reality of the world that they have been given, as it's been given to them since age 5 or age 9, or when you're 23 years old, and how you all have the same kind of collective hive mind mentality, and something comes along one day and snatches your jaw and rips you out of it, and you start to wonder what the heck is actually going on out there. Those people that come out of it and say, hey, this is the truth that I have come to realize. This is what is going on, and people need to know about it, and they stake their reputation on the line. They stake careers on the line. They stake unbelievable amounts of mocking, belittlement, and betrayal to be predicated on the rest of their life. They are the courageous ones, and they're the forerunners for people like me that can finally say, hey, there's some brave people out there, and it'd be worth it, even if you suffer these things, for people to come to know the truth. So thank each and every one of you that's ever gone before me to speak the truth and to be willing to do it with conviction, because the other side loves what they believe, and they are such big proponents of it, and they will shout it to the mountains, man. We need to become just as bold about what we believe.
Yep.
Nice. Hey, you were talking about split personalities, and in the book you mentioned that as you go, like, kind of through the process of getting over a lot of this stuff, a lot of the memories of what caused the split came back.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some of, like, your most common personalities that you would find, like, or that you remember, like, do you remember what caused the split that would cause those personalities, or no?
On certain occasions, yes. Like,
could you give me a couple examples of, like, personalities that you had and, like, what caused them?
Yeah. So, well, all right. So, one of the ones that caused a split for a personality of mine was a sacrifice of a person in what is basically a belittling of the crucifixion. where they basically, it was just, they killed a homeless guy and they made it look up like a crucifixion scene and like hammer nails, like all that, and convinced you that you're getting back at the guy who abused you, and you finally think that this guy who you're killing or watching being killed is one of the abusers, one of these pedophiles that deserves it. And so they make you believe that this person, this kind of Jesus-like figure, is the Messiah that's going to be destroyed and killed, and then this other perfectly well-dressed, well-groomed person walks up and offers you the opportunity to have power to destroy people that deserve it. And so there's a shattering of the mind, internal agreement that I never want to see life again. I never want to see this world again. And so you shear off kind of yourself. It's a self-spoken oath of destruction on yourself. You never want to see anything else again. You're done. And so you kind of destroy a piece of your soul. Well, that piece that's broken off gets shaped into the form of what they wanted. And they take that blank personality, that new, fresh to be painted car, and they turn it into what they want it to be after that.
So you witnessed a homeless man being crucified?
Yeah.
And so what do? They just wander the streets and like find someone passed out and take them to a ritual?
You'll have different methods. So a lot of it is done generally through grooming. You want willful initiates. You want willful sacrifices. So there's a big deal when it comes to intent with the person who is being sacrificed. If that person does so of their own free will, quote unquote, they believe there's a greater spiritual releasing that is done through that, or certain rituals are predicated on that being the only thing that allows the ritual to be successful. So
Wow.
So a lot of times you'll have finder programs. There was a guy in Colorado who my friend was doing street preaching down at a place called the Denver Rescue Mission, a very well-known shelter, homeless shelter, rehabilitation shelter in Denver, and met a homeless guy who said that in Westminster, Colorado, that there is a very active coven operating out of a place called the Front Range Community College, that had a coven that was operating, and they would recruit homeless people through drugs. They would offer them drugs, they would offer them employment, they would offer them housing, they would offer them apartment a lot of times to stay, and they would be businessmen from the community who were sponsoring them off the streets, and they would befriend them, take care of them, and kind of clean them up, and or get them even more deeply addicted to the substance of their choice. And they would get them to a place where they were so committed to being willing to help out the people that were helping them out that they would go along with it, or was like this individual was showered, washed, bathed, fed a specific diet for 3 days leading up to this ritual. And they were continually trying to reinforce him that he needed to do this of his own free choosing, and he couldn't, and he freaked out and ran, and ended up telling my friend the story. So you have different programs, we call them finders programs, of ways that you can recruit people in, whether that person's intentionally just going to be a sacrifice, or that person's going to be someone that you're going to hook on so that you can extort money from them to continue to fund these activities.
Wow, bro. Wow. You mentioned in the book when you were little that they would hold like gambling rings and they would make you fight in cages, and
Yep.
they used like cattle prods to like initiate the fights if you wouldn't do it.
Yeah, to spice it up. Yeah.
How many people would go to those? I mean, is it just like 4 or 5 guys, or is it like 50 people, or?
Well, it'd be small groups. Generally, what you'll see is like a if it was a big gathering, 10, 12, 15, 18 people, they tended to not get much bigger than that. Becomes a lot harder to control leakage, and so it was very much oftentimes just filmed lots, or audio recordings at the time. It was a little harder to do discrete video recording when it was kind of first happening for me when I was younger, but it got better obviously as technology advanced.
Yeah, I can't imagine what they're doing now with all the technology that's available, dude. That's crazy. Anything you left out of the book but you wanted to put in now, or intentionally left out?
A couple hundred pages. I don't know if anybody else has ever written a book out there, but this one was a long time coming. But there was, if anything, that now, I mean, obviously it's been a few months since I published the book, and to have come to a place of kind of experiencing what some of the unknown consequences would be for coming out and talking about this. And I think in our heads, any of us run through these scenarios of what's going to happen when you come out and start talking about these fringe topics. Like for someone to come out there and start talking about the flat earth, or even just suggest that I want to look into something like the flat earth, is such an immediate ostracizing of the people in your life, almost guaranteed, man. There's so many things that happen when you go out there and start posting things about anti-vaxxing, or you want to talk about abortion, you want to talk about what they call these hot topic issues, right? These high emotionally charged issues that people want to come out there and start talking about. It's terrifying to do that. If anything, I wish I'd been willing to talk a little bit more about is how that process is more effectively overcome, for people to find a way to overcome that kind of internal resistance. And so much of that really is, for me, it was studying these actual figures from the Bible and starting to believe the Bible is a history book. And these are, a lot more often than not, man, when you read about people in the Bible that did spectacular things, they were just dudes. They were just people. They were just normal people. Like, they weren't like the it guy. Like, they chose Saul as king because he was like literally the most handsome man in all of Israel, and he destroyed that kingdom. He destroyed that kingdom. The guy was so possessed by demonic spirits at times, he was throwing spears at David trying to kill him, right? This is the chosen one of Israel, and so is Saul. But the world will pick bad people inherently. The world is wired and predisposed to pick the bad people, the people that have the character flaws that allow them to be willing to do whatever it takes to climb to the top. Those people tend to rise to the top in our world system. And the normal, good people that are out there that think they're just something that's average have no idea the potential capacity that they have to do extraordinary things if they're willing to love much and be willing to give away everything they've ever had for the sake of the truth, right? Jesus tells a story of a man who found a treasure in a field that was so extraordinary, he was willing to sell everything he had to try to buy that field to gain that treasure. And I have found that treasure, and I found it in something that was not within me, that was not in this worldly system, that wouldn't fail me. I found it in faith in Jesus, and it genuinely changed me. It changed me and made me into a new person that was willing to stand on my little what I do have and be willing to offer myself wholly and completely unto him. And I wish more people would be willing to see that they are extraordinary in their normal life, in their normal experiences of what they've gone through, has shaped them to be a person that only they could be in order to achieve things that are needed today. So I hope people will be willing to make a decision about coming out and speaking the truth on these things that they're trying to learn, these things that have happened to them or the people around them, be willing to expose what is being done in darkness, so that this kingdom, this web that's been invoked over us our whole life, can be destroyed and truth can be reigning freely in our world.
Amen. And even just on a personal level, even if we don't expose all the evil and change the world, exposing the truth does something to your soul that gives you peace when you sleep at night, makes you smile in the morning when you wake up. It's just, if I didn't go on this crusade telling people about flat earth, then I just wouldn't feel as free as I do and as liberated. And sharing is caring. And store treasure in heaven. And Nathan, I think you're doing a great job, bro. And I just hope we stay longtime friends, bro, until the end.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I'm gonna wrap it up. What else do you like? What are you into? What are you passionate about? What do you spend time doing now?
Taking care of a family. That's what I do a lot of now. And my wife and I live full time in an RV, and so on our YouTube channel we also put out videos kind of chronicling our journey moving out of suburbia and into the life on the run. And it is absolutely insane and wonderful. And our first week in our RV, I got it stuck in the mud. Just stuff like that, which is great. Everything you hope for when you picture these super highlight reels of people's RV lives. It's going to be just like that. Ashlyn knows what I'm talking about. Yeah. It's just going to be a constant vacation, and it's not. So my full-time job right now is as a husband, as a father, and as someone who's taking care of this mobile home on wheels. It's a blast, and I love it. And honestly, a lot of the topics that I have an insatiable need to know. So I'm always studying and learning. And right now I'm studying, as a lot of people are out there, been studying the kind of Tartaria and mud flood kind of stuff for, probably about 6-8 months as well. And studying a lot of just old world architecture as I've been traveling across the country and kind of documenting my own little understanding of how these cities were laid out in our country. So much of what we've been taught about even our own country's history is just so obfuscated, and it's just absolutely fascinating for me. So that's an area that I really love right now, is kind of that
No,
modern,
bro. Columbus discovered the new world, Nathan.
Oh, I'm sorry. I totally forgot.
It's all right.
Promise. You can trust us. We're the government. We'd never lie to you.
Oh, I just had to educate you real quick.
I'm so glad, dude. I'm so glad. Wikipedia never wrong. Never wrong.
You know, we're in like this day and age where people think you're stupid if you don't know exactly what Google tells you the answer is. And it's
you
like,
are.
It's like
you can't regurgitate that.
So
you do not align with the system. You're an outsider.
Hey, I got about 50 people on the YouTube watching it. I know thousands of people will watch this interview, so I want to say now, they buy your book at snatchfromtheflames.com.
Yep, we have digital copy there as well for people that want a digital like e-reader version. You can go to Amazon and search "Snatched from the Flames" as well. It's right there on Amazon. But you can go to my website, you follow up with our work, and yeah, please, if you guys enjoyed the interview tonight, and please subscribe to our channel as well. And if you really want to know what it is that we had to say, purchase the book. If anyone can afford the book for any reason, please just let me know. You can go to Snatched, or just email me at snatchedfromtheflames@gmail.com. I can send you a copy of the book as well. Please don't let cost be a hindrance for you as well. There's been people throughout my life that helped me out when I needed it, and books really do have a huge impact on people's lives. So Russ Dizdar is a guy who did that at a conference I was at years ago, and he had no idea who I was, but couldn't afford his book at the time, and he said, freely take it. And that book radically helped to bring healing into my life as well.
Yep. So everyone, don't just go buy one book, buy 5 books so you can give them away to your friends and your family, because sharing is caring. Better to give than to receive. And I love you, man. Love's patient and kind. It's not jealous, boastful, proud, or rude. Does not demand its own way. Keeps no record of iniquity. Never loses hope. Is always faithful and endures all things. And you are definitely an endurer of all things, bro. So I'm honored to have you on the show. I'm gonna wrap it up. Ashlyn, anything you want to say to Nathan before we say bye?
I did have one more question. I did.
Let's hear it.
So, is your great grandfather the one who bought you still alive? And is there any sorry, I used the word but is there any anti-aging effects to this drinking of the blood?
Yeah, does he look like he's 40 and he's like 100?
Do they lie about their age?
So two questions real quick. No, my great-grandfather is no longer alive. That's kind of why one of the other reasons I went out and publicly kind of stated who he was. The second question you alluded to is, does it have a transformative effect or an anti-aging effect? And on one side of it, they absolutely do believe it brings in vitality. I've seen it physically change demeanor, disposition, and on one occasion I've seen it physically change someone to where they looked like a lot of their skin got tighter against their body, like tightened up. I don't know if that was a change in blood flow, but at the time it gave it the appearance that, yeah, like they'd had a facelift basically after engaging in this ritual and drinking of the product that was created at the time. So yes, on one side it can do that. Do I think it happens all the time? I don't know. I have no idea what's actually happening within the body. That's when you're consuming that kind of thing.
Gosh. Well, Nathan, dude, thanks for having the courage to chat about all this with us, and honestly quenching like my curiosity, because my mind wanders, and I'm so glad I got to do this interview, bro. And you'll be in my prayers always and forever. You got my number. You call me over anything. And everybody who's listening, please go buy Snatched from the Flames. One of the best books I've read since I've become awoke to the New World Order, satanic rituals, just being a Christian. So thanks for writing it and all that stuff, Nathan. So
thank you guys as well.
Of course, brother. We'll see you around.
Right.
I'm sure I'll run into you at a conference. Are you going to take on the world as well?
Yeah, I'm planning on it as of now. there's another child on the way as well, which may bring some complications, but in a good way. In a good way.
Yeah.
In all the good ways. So that's the good news. But yeah, I'm picked as one of the speakers for Take on the World
Well,
in
I
Ohio.
hope we see
In
you
Ohio.
guys there.
What's that?
I said I hope we see you guys there.
Oh, me too. Absolutely, absolutely. So we're still gunning for it. We're gonna do everything we can to get there as well. So really excited for that. And if you are in Canada, like I said, look up Truth Quest Calgary. And even if you're not in Canada, they make these things called passports where you just have to basically sell your soul a little bit, and then you can go across the border and do all kinds of wonderful things. So you should do that just for this conference.
That's so nice, Nathan, that if you apply, they'll let you travel.
I'm so appreciative of that right being given and bestowed upon this woeful subject.
Oh, jeez. All right. Well.
All right.
Until next time, brother.
Thanks, guys. You all have a great night.
Of course, man.
Thank you.
Yeah.
God bless.